Hi, Dr. Dan Moselle, Moselle Holistic here. How are you? Hey, we are, this is our day three of the lockdown Moselle Holistic, your body as an ally. What we're doing is we're, um, we're just offering different services, different ideas, ways to help keep you engaged and have you think of health, because our body is an ally. And I think with this COVID-19, it's becoming even more clear that we really need to take care of our ally because it's just too important, too important. We need to make sure that, because I'm thinking if 10 years down the road this comes again, I'm going to be that much older. I'll be well into my seniors. And I better be in good shape, right? So I'm hoping we're all thinking that, not just this, but anything and everything, you know. Plus, but anyhow, today we have Dr. Dan DiBiasio. He's a fellow chiropractor, and he's going to be coming into our office here once the dust settles. So today he's going to be talking about balance and things you can do to help create balance. You know, balance is so important, and just that whole concept of it. So we'll have him get into it, and then he's going to talk about foot care. So, Dr. D, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dan. So, hello everyone. As Dr. Dan mentioned, I am Dr. Dan DiBiasio, or just Dr. D for short. So, as Dr. Dan mentioned, I'm going to be coming in and working with him. So I'm really excited to get started once all this COVID-19 stuff blows over. But until then, what we're going to be doing is basically running these videos. So Dr. Dan asked me to basically run small workouts or just talk about topics that I find interesting or that I want to talk about. And what I'd really appreciate is if any of you have ideas as to what you'd like to hear from me or what you'd like talked about, shoot Dr. Dan an email or contact them on Facebook, or you can shoot me an email at danieldibiasiodc@gmail.com. I'll make sure that that email is listed somewhere so that you can contact me directly if you need to, because I'm looking for good topics, and what I really want to do is just provide a need. So if there's something that you want to hear about, I'm more than happy to put together a little presentation and talk about it for you. So before we jump in, since this is my first introduction to most of you, a few of you I may know from shadowing in Dr. Dan's office in the past, but a lot of you I probably don't know. So I actually am a 2015 graduate from Logan College of Chiropractic. It's in St. Louis. And right after I graduated, I went and worked in Michigan for 3 years. So I spent those 3 years working in a couple different practices. One of them was really focused in on structural corrections. We'd give a lot of rehab exercises and stretches. So I have a bit of a background in that exercise and rehab world, as well as with my schooling, there was a lot of that rehab focus there. Then I ended up moving back to Illinois, back to Chicagoland area in 2019, and worked in an office in Palos Hills where, again, we did a lot of exercise and rehab. We had a couple different physiotherapy machines, kind of like a TENS unit, like one of those electrical stimulation machines to help with muscle cramping, stuff like that. So more currently what I've been focused in more on is the applied kinesiology and nutrition side of things. And when I ended up talking to Dr. Dan about doing that more and working with him, you know, that's kind of when we decided now is a better time than ever to get working with that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and where I'm going with what we've been doing. So today's topic is actually going to be on your feet and balance. So this may kind of seem like a funny topic to start out on for me, but it was one that came really natural to me. I'm a volleyball player. I've done a lot of weightlifting and powerlifting, and I've been a runner, a biker. And with all that stuff, I've sustained a few ankle injuries. I've had problems with balance and issues like that. And I'll get into it a little bit, but when you have a problem with your foot, it can actually cause problems all the way up into your knees, hips, low back, mid back, even into the neck. So I oftentimes find with a lot of my patients that when they have a low back issue or a hip issue, I end up spending a lot of time working on their ankles or their lower leg or their feet to try to balance out the whole chain. So I really want to focus in on the feet and ankles today, give you some exercises and stretches to do to strengthen the feet and ankles, as well as to practice your balance. So we'll get into that towards the end. But first, what we're going to do is really just talk about why this is so important. So the short of it is just what I already mentioned, is that most of us have foot issues and we don't even realize it, whether it be from an old injury, whether it be from wearing shoes that are too tight or too loose or don't offer you the proper support. We tend to have foot problems that we don't know about. So like I said, when you have that foot problem, it can actually lead to issues in a knee or issues with your hip or low back. So addressing those sorts of issues are very, very important, and taking care of your feet ends up becoming really important because we just don't do it at all. So the second thing that's really important about balance is that it feeds your brain. So one really interesting fact that I love is that the balance center of your brain is called the cerebellum. So it's kind of the area right in the back here, kind of sits underneath the rest of your brain. But your cerebellum is important for controlling your movement and also controlling your balance. It makes up about 10% of your brain's total volume, but 50% of the neurons in your brain are devoted to just the cerebellum. So do you think that balance and movement's important to our brain? Heck yeah. 50% of your neurons are dedicated to that alone. So balance is very, very important. Also, as we age, the ability to balance on one foot for up to 30 seconds is one of the main indicators for fall risk. So if you're unable to balance for 30 seconds on one foot, you're at a much higher risk of falling and causing an injury, breaking a hip or ending up in the hospital or immobile, which tends to lead in a bad direction. So one of my main goals with a lot of patients is to really work on balance, make sure that they're staying mobile and able to move well, because it's very important for your brain, for aging properly, and just for your overall health. So as I mentioned, why I wanted to do this is because a lot of us rarely take care of our feet. I mean, outside of maybe some people get pedicures, once every few weeks. Outside of that, people don't really take care of their feet too much. So just like how we brush our teeth regularly or do our posture exercises, having little things to do to take care of your feet and make sure that they're happy is really, really important. So that's kind of my goal for today. So before we get started with the actual exercises that I'm going to recommend, I just have a few things. First, if any of the exercises or stretches are really uncomfortable to you, or if they end up, just not working for you, just don't do them yet. You can always come back to, we're recording this, you can always come back to the recorded video and watch it again and pick out a new thing. I actually had a teacher who I really liked, who used to say something along the lines of, I'm going to give you a lot today, take what works for you and leave the rest behind. So that's what I want you to do. Hopefully you can walk away today with one or two things, maybe more if you're ready for it, but that's really what we want you to do. So outside of that, there are a couple other things that can cause poor balance other than just lack of practice. I mean, obviously you need to practice balance to get good with it, and you need to practice, good care for your feet to have good mobility. But there are things like medications that can make you dizzy. If you're dehydrated, you might have poor balance, or you might be a little dizzy. And if you have vision or hearing problems, that could also add to it. So if you feel like any of those things may be contributing, don't push yourself too hard. We don't want you to fall over or have any sort of accidents. But if you do have balance issues that you don't think are related to that, we might need to talk down the road in the office about what we can do to really get you back on track and get it all nailed down and get it going. So as of right now, as long as there aren't any questions right now about balance or foot care or kind of why we want to be doing that stuff, we'll just go ahead and get into what we're going to be doing today, or kind of a short little exercise thing. So I do have there's a couple things you're going to need today. One of them is probably a yoga mat or just a soft surface, a nice carpeted area for you to be able to stand on or sit on if you need. A towel might be useful for you. And then there's a couple things. You're going to want either a golf ball or a lacrosse ball, one of those things. I think some people have, what do you guys call them? The peanuts, where you can do them for like the neck and mid back. A peanut might work for this. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it yet. And then the last thing would be a chair, or definitely a chair, but possibly a counter or something to hold your balance on for a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and share my screen for the actual workout here. So what we're going to be doing is there's three major things that I'd like to do with foot care and balance. The first is going to be warming up. The second is going to be actually practicing your balance and strengthening your foot, feet, and ankles. And the last thing is stretching out and cooling down. So for the first one, well, let me make sure you can see me all right here. I'll come back to this screen in just a little bit, but this will be available. I'll see if Dr. Dan can post it on to the Facebook group or maybe somewhere where you guys can access it or have a copy of it yourself. So we'll get out of that for right now. Let me see. All right. I need to move you guys. All right. So the first couple things for warming up are going to be fairly easy. Can you guys still hear me okay if I'm back over here? Okay, good. So the first couple things are going to be easy. We're going to start out with ankle circles and just ABCs. So for those, they are exactly what they sound like. For ankle circles, what you're going to want to do is just sitting in a chair, just go in a clockwise direction and then a counterclockwise direction. So for ankle circles, they're very easy. What you want to do is just warm up the joints a little bit and make sure that the blood's flowing and that the ligaments and muscles in and around the ankles are starting to warm up. What I recommended doing is about 30 seconds per foot, 30 seconds up to a minute. And you can repeat that a couple times if you want for the ankle circles. Another really good warm up for the ankles in general is just spelling the ABCs with your ankles or with your toes. So you want to imagine that there's a pen on the tip of your toes and you just start to write the ABCs by just moving your ankles. So it's a little bit harder to do, but it's a little more fun than ankle circles. So with the ABCs, I'd recommend just going through the ABCs with your right ankle and then with your left ankle, and no need to repeat that if you don't want to. So that's it. The warm up, again, should be fairly easy, fairly simple. So I'm not going to get into that too much. So any questions about the warm up there before we move on? Nope. Cool. All right. So the second thing that we want to do is really start to work on balance and strengthening. So one of these things, hopefully you're familiar with, it's actually the founder's exercise. Let me make sure I got a good angle here. Get my chair out of the way. So this should be a review for most people. Hopefully it's a review, but the founder's exercise is a really good one for your core, but it also does stress the ankles just a little bit. Let me check this out here. So for the founders, I'm going to be brief because Dr. Dan does have a YouTube video of this. So if you need more clarification with it, go to his YouTube channel and check out that founders. Toss him an email and he should be able to send you the link to if you need. So for founders, what you want to start out doing is find your hips and find the bony point in the front of your hips. That's called your ASIS. So we're going to find that point, and then we're going to find our ribs. So your lower ribs. So you're going to have your ASIS and your ribs here. And what you want to do throughout this whole exercise is maintain space through here. So what we don't want to do is either curl these together or spread these 2 points apart. So we want to keep nice and stable through here the entire time. So after that, what we're going to do is take a stance about hip width apart with our feet. I'm going to turn to the side here. We're going to go about hip width apart. Keep that nice space through here. And then what we're going to do is start to get into our exercise. So we're going to bend at the knees a little bit and bring our hips back, just like that. You want to let your knees stay in behind the toes or even with the toes and really sit back into your hips. So when you're doing this right, if you're just sitting here, you should still have that good distance between the front of your hip and your lower rib. And you should start to feel a little bit of tension in through your quads and through the front of the leg here. So after that, what you're going to start to do is push your hips back and bend through the hips. So almost like one of those birds that would go down and sip the water and come back up, how it moves very still through the top. You're just going to be bending forward right at the hips, just like that, while maintaining that good space between the ASIS or that front of the hip and the lower ribs. So if this is all you can do, this is a great spot to start. You want to hold this for about 30 seconds. If you want to start to add a little bit more, while you're doing this, make sure your weight's in your heels. You can start to bring your arms up in front of you to add more of a balance into it, more of a balance element into it. Some people like to go back a little bit, so you can open up the chest. If you have a really tight chest, this usually feels pretty good too. So experiment around and see what feels good for you. But I usually like to hold it just like this the whole time, making sure that you're able to breathe really well, take those deep breaths into the belly. Again, I think there's some videos about where we just talked about breathing yesterday, so hopefully you've been practicing that a little bit. And what I'd like you to do is hold this for about 30 seconds to a minute and repeat that a couple of times. So there should be another about 20 seconds of holding that if you're practicing along with. All right, so that is the founder's exercise. So that one should hopefully, like I said, hopefully you're familiar with it, or you've done it before or been introduced to it. It's a wonderful exercise for the core, but it's also great for just getting your brain integrated and starting to work on that balance and moving together. So I did have a question from somebody, and they were asking about their ankles cracking while they were doing the warm-ups and just kind of going in circles. Cracking in the ankle is very, very common for most people. What it usually is a tendon snapping past another tendon and causing a snap. As long as the cracking isn't painful or restricting your motion or anything like that, it shouldn't be an issue. And actually, as you warm up and work on this a little bit more, the cracking should decrease. But if it does continue or if it becomes painful or a problem, that's definitely something would probably want to look at a little bit more. So if it is painful, I wouldn't do it too much. Does that answer that question? Awesome. Okay, so that was the founder's exercise. Hopefully any questions on that before we jump into the next one? Okay, all right, so the next couple are very easy. So again, we're not gonna need to run through them too much, but we can kind of practice along at home. The next one is a single foot stance. So it's exactly what it sounds like. But what I usually like to do is grab a chair to hold on to. So just for balance, just in case. And then what you're gonna wanna do is, again, we're gonna stand with our feet together this time. So our heels and toes can start to touch. And what we'll do is bring our weight over just into the left foot and start out practicing just balancing in the left foot while your right toes are still on the ground. So you can start to lift your heel up off the ground. So that's the very basic, that is stage one, just getting into that one foot while holding onto a chair and just having your right toes there for support. If you want to, what you can start to do is bring that right leg up into the air so that you're just on your left leg. And then eventually let go of the chair. And then you can even make it harder and harder down the road, but we'll get to that towards the end. I have a couple of cool things that you can look at for balance. But this is the single leg balance. This is that thing that I mentioned before, where being able to do this for 30 seconds is a really good indicator for your overall balance. And being able to do that will decrease your risk of falls in the future. So what I recommend doing is practicing it for at least 30 seconds. So hopefully you have a little timer on your phone or something. So we're gonna go ahead and do the left foot and right foot one time each, and we'll see if we can make it through without falling here. Let's see, we're gonna get our stopwatch out. All right, we're gonna start on the left foot. So we'll go ahead for 30 seconds here. So it's a good challenge. A lot of times what you'll notice as you are balancing, if you imagine my hand is my foot, is you'll feel like your foot's crashing to one side or the other. That's a really good thing. It means that you're gonna, well, it's not good, but it should decrease. You're gonna be strengthening those muscles and practicing this. So that's 30 seconds on the left. Made it through that one. Now we'll go over to the right side here and see if we can get that one. Ooh. So with these balance exercises, what I'd recommend doing if you're going to be doing them The single leg stance, this is a great one to do just during commercial breaks if you're watching TV, which, you know, a lot of us are locked at home. So I'm assuming if you're like me, TV and movies and, you know, Netflix and all those streaming services, that's 30 seconds, have become really common. So in between episodes, or, you know, when you get up to go to the bathroom, if you do spend a minute balancing on each foot or a minute balancing, it's just a good way to, you know, mix up what you're doing. So the last one that's really good for balance and coordination is a simple heel toe walk. So this one, again, it's just like the field sobriety test for the police. If you've been drinking too much, what we're going to be doing is try to pick somewhere where you have a straight line, and you're going to want to do heel to toe. So for this one, again, what I'd recommend doing is nice and slow and controlled, and trying to do heel toe walking for about 30 seconds to a minute, just following back and forth. It's going to look like I'm pacing back and forth back here if I do it. So I'm assuming that one's pretty self-explanatory. So if you'd like, I'm going to have you practice that one a little bit. And then if you have any questions, let me know about that one. We'll toss back up. All right, looks like you all made it back okay. So, all right, so that's the heel to toe walking. So I'm sharing the workout plan here. So we had our warm up here with the ankle circles and the ABCs, and, you know, how much time to do that. For the balance and strengthening, what I'd recommend is doing this. If you're going to do it as a straight workout, I'd recommend doing it 2 to 3 times each. So maybe running through a founders, single foot stance, then heel toe walking, and then repeat that over again. The founders, single foot stance, and then heel toe walking. So I'm not going to run it through it again after we get off the call. I'm going to have you guys go ahead and you can take over and do it yourselves if you'd like. So guys, we're just going to move on here to the last couple things, which, again, stretching and cooling down is very, very important. Tight calf muscles are one of the main reasons that we end up having issues with ankles, as well as things like plantar fasciitis, you know, foot issues, things like that. So we don't use our calf muscles or our feet nearly as much as we should because of the types of shoes that we wear. So making sure that we have all that stuff stretched out and moving well is really, really important. So the first one that we're going to do is a calf stretch. The second one's going to be a shin stretch. And the last one's one of my favorite. It's you use a golf ball or a lacrosse ball to give yourself a good massage on the bottom of your foot. That's, again, these are all ones that you can do in between, you know, commercial breaks or, you know, while you're watching TV. So these are things that hopefully you can incorporate, you know, tonight or tomorrow. So a calf stretch is pretty easy. Hopefully you've seen these before. The really basic one is to go up against a wall, and let's see, how can I show this? So I'm going to use this wall over here. Hopefully you can see me okay. So for the basic calf stretch, it's always going to be your back leg that you're stretching out. So you want to stand close up to a wall and make sure that you have good support. And then with the back leg, you want to try to reach it back like you're stepping backwards, and then try to bring your heel to the ground. So for that, you should feel a good stretch into the back of the leg. If you need a little bit more of a stretch, what you can do is try putting your toes on a wall, onto the wall. This is a closet here, so I can't quite do it. You put your toes onto the wall and then lean forward a little bit. And that will give you a really good stretch into the calf muscle. So for that one, if you need, you can always do it on the ground where you're like this. So you can do one at a time. You can do both at once. I prefer the one at a time. I feel like I can get a little bit of a deeper stretch with that. So those are a couple ways to stretch out the calves. Another way, if you have a towel, this is where the towel could come in handy. You can just sit on the ground and wrap the towel around your foot and pull back while straightening your leg out a little bit. So as you're doing that, you should feel a stretch into here, but you'll also stretch your hamstrings out a little bit too, which is okay. The calves and the hamstrings are all connected by this stuff called fascia. And when you're stretching the fascia in your calves, you're probably stretching in your hamstrings no matter what. So pulling that foot back and getting a good stretch into the calf and really trying to get those toes up towards the knees is going to be really good for you. So other than stretching that way, you should stretch the front side of your shin as well. And again, a really easy way to do that is really just sitting, and you can either pull your foot back this way, or a way that I like to do it is on all fours. So you can be on all fours here. I have a bed, so I'm going to go ahead and use that for my hands. And put your toes down towards the ground. And then from there, what you can do is start to sit back just a little bit. So it might be a lot to sit all the way back, but if you can get a little bit back and get some stretch into the front of the shins and just hold that for about 30 seconds, and then come on back up. After doing that, I'd recommend relaxing a little bit, do some of your ankle circles and really iron it out, because we don't do that a lot, and it can be a lot on the ankles. So that's one that, be careful doing, don't overdo it. But it's a really good stretch for the front of those shins. It should stretch out that area where people end up getting those shin splints, but also work on the calves helps a lot with shin splints as well too. So, okay, so those are the stretches. Any questions on the stretches? Pretty straightforward.
No, Dr. D, you're sharing the screen. Can you quit sharing that?
Oh, yep. So you saw none of the stretches, huh?
No, we could see you, just you were small.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully that's all you needed.
Yeah, it was very visible. Good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Still not used to this whole Zoom thing. All right, then the last one is, I'll get you back up here. Yeah, the last one, this is one of my favorite ones to do, especially for people with plantar fasciitis or really any sort of foot problem. I have people work on this at home. So a golf ball is a good one to use. It's very, very hard, so it might hurt a little bit. So you can try with a golf ball. If that's too much, if you have a lacrosse ball, or I think those peanuts, Dr. Dan, are they lacrosse balls or tennis balls as well?
We make them out of all kinds of, the 12-inch softballs are made from tennis balls, lacrosse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any of those sorts of things will work. It's really anything that you can put on the ground and put pressure into your foot. Another really good one that I like to use for people with plantar fasciitis is actually freezing a water bottle and putting it into, and then, so you have a frozen water bottle, you take it out, and then you roll the bottom of your foot with it. But for this, what I like to do is while sitting, just toss a golf ball on the ground, and you basically just give yourself a nice little foot massage. So some areas to focus in on that tend to be a problem for most people is right in the middle of the foot, right where that arch is. You can usually find some good little tender spots in there. And then you do want to go up into the ball of the foot, kind of in between the toe knuckles, roll those out a little bit, and just find areas where you might feel like some crunchies, or you might feel some tight areas or some really painful areas. For that, it feels really good to just roll them out. You don't need to use too much. You don't need to use too much pressure on the foot, but when you do find a tender area, you can dig in a good amount. So again, don't bruise yourself. use good judgment with this. We trust you guys, but it feels really, really good. So I'd usually do this for about a minute on each side, at least a minute on each side, and repeat that a couple times if you can. It's, again, like I said, really good for loosening up the feet and keeping good motion in the feet. So hopefully no questions about that. That one should be pretty straightforward. So they do sell things. We actually have something like this in my house. This is a roller for your foot specifically. So it has these little nubs on it, so you can just roll your foot. So there's things like this that you can get all over, people off of Amazon. This one you're supposed to be able to fill up with water and freeze as well, but we've never figured out how to do that. Another couple things that might be useful if you really want to get into this, if this is the 101, this is all the basic stuff that we just went through. But if you want to bring it forward a little bit, there's a couple different things that I'd recommend getting to work on. One of them, and one of my favorites, is just a balance board. So this is a board that you're going to stand on to make balancing harder. So instead of just doing the single leg balance, what I do with this thing is, you can't see it, but it's down there, is you step onto it and you just try to balance by, not letting the sides touch it. So this adds a whole different level of of difficulty. So it makes it a lot harder to balance. So you can do it with 2 feet. You can do it with just on 1 foot, which I might fall if I try that here. Luckily, I'm on some thick carpet. So with the balance boards, that's another great way to add difficulty to this. On top of that, if you have the balance board, you can also add in other things to make it more difficult. Something as simple as taking your lacrosse ball while you're balancing and just throwing from hand to hand. So you're trying to incorporate more difficult pathways here. You're trying to use your hand-eye coordination while also balancing. So progressively making things a little bit harder for yourself is what's going to really cause you to grow and get better at this stuff. So maybe down the road, a balance board would be nice. And then another really good thing is this is a calf stretcher. So what it can actually do is set itself up at a very low angle, and it can get progressively more and more angled. So this would be on the ground. You can use it to stretch your calves. You might see this in in your gyms. You might see some of this stuff. You might see them around. But I'd really recommend this, especially if you have really tight calves or bad ankle mobility. That's been a great one that I've been using to basically help rehab a couple ankle injuries that I've had over the years. So that's all I really wanted to start out with for most people. It's ankle, like I was saying, ankle mobility and making sure that we have strong ankles and good balance is very, very important. So working on this stuff and taking care of your feet and taking care of that balance is something that I would highly recommend people do. Don't do this every day. Start out every other day for a couple weeks, and then down the road it can get down more to just once every few days working on it. But it tends to be, it's very, very good for the brain and very good for your overall health. So that's all I had for today. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free. If not, Dr. Dan, I'll let you take over from here.
Awesome. Hey, Dr. D, great job. Thank you. I like the idea of adding those other things, getting the balance board, and like you said, that's further down the road. But the whole thing is, I've noticed, and it's always been this way for me. I could stand on my left leg for a long time. My right, I'm so wobbly, and I know for me, definitely my right hip, my glutes aren't as good, So that's why I'm glad you added the founders, because I really think that's going to help all that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
what do you?
I think you say the founders are kind of the foundation for everything. So foundation for movement. So it's.
Yeah, I love that thing. I think it's the best. So we'll definitely make sure we will post all this on, for sure, our Facebook. That's Moselle Holistic, and we're on. I got all these social media things. I don't manage it, thankfully, but. All right, cool. Yeah, well, great. That's awesome. And then tomorrow we were doing a meditation and with Chris. So, Dr. D, thank you. We'll be talking to you. Appreciate it.